Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we all stand today. I'm on the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, so I'd like to acknowledge them as traditional owners and pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. So thank you all for joining our 5th What If webinar. For those who haven't been before, although I do see quite a few familiar names and faces, the idea behind our weekly webinars was born out of the need to focus on what the mental health system would look like if it were working well, so a bit more of a positive focus. We've had and will continue to have guest speakers each week discussing a myriad of topics within the mental health space. We've still got another month or so of speakers, and we just keep adding more to the end because they're quite popular. So just a few details on how today will run. So the talk will be about 35 to 40 minutes, and then after that we will have about 10 to 15 minutes where you can ask any questions. Instead of calling the questions out, because there's quite a few of you on the call, if you can just type them into the chat system. I know quite a few of you have already seen it, but there's a button in the middle of the bottom of your screen. Yeah, if you can just type your questions in there and then I'll read them out at the end, that would be great. If we don't have enough time to get through all of the questions, I will take them all, pass them on to Maggie, and then I'll get responses and share them back with you via email, which I've got through Eventbrite. Just a few quick Zoom etiquette guidelines. If you can just ensure you're kept on mute for the entire webinar, that would be great. And I want to just flag that this is being recorded because we're putting it up on the website for people who couldn't attend. So today we are honoured to have Maggie Toko discussing what if culture, gender and mental health fused together in a melting pot of promise. Doesn't that sound nice? Maggie identifies as Indigenous to Aotearoa and is a lived experience leader who brings a wealth of wisdom and expertise, including extensive experience in senior management and service delivery in community mental health and the welfare sector more broadly. So welcome, Maggie. I will pass over to you.
Thanks very much, Emily. And kia ora, everybody. I've never done a webinar before, so bear with me. If you go off, if I disappear, it's because I've done something that I shouldn't have touched. I've touched something I shouldn't have touched. But firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Now my talk today is solely about what it means to be in my skin. And I'll just go back to this picture here. This is, when I was making the PowerPoints, I pulled up a number of stock pictures of maraes and different artists from Aotearoa. And then I showed my younger sister, who works for a Māori politician in New Zealand in Aotearoa. And she said, she goes, I've been to that marae. And I was like, oh, okay, what's the chance of that? Of all the pictures I chose, she had been to that one. And she said, why don't you use our marae? And I said, well, I haven't got a picture of it. And she said, so I'll get you one. So this is actually our marae. And it's, for me, it's a place to gather as equals. So and I've taken many friends there over the years, and we're all the same when we're on there. And it's quite significant to how, when I was brought up going to this marae, which is quite significant in my life. So anyway, I showed Jamie, and she says, you know, now you've got our marae. And then I had some pictures of some very influential women, and she said, oh, no, you don't want to use those, you want to use these women. So there are a couple of pictures of very influential women in my culture that you'll see at some point. And the other thing was that I had a picture of a canoe, which is quite significant for me because I really believe that life is about being on a canoe, on a journey forward, not back, but forward. And Jamie goes, oh, you can't use that canoe. So I'm like, okay. So, and she said, that's the Māori Queen's canoe. And so I just, thank God I showed Jamie the PowerPoint, because I would be horrified if I did something that I shouldn't do. So there is a picture of a canoe, and it happens to be our tribal canoe for Tainui. So, so I've got all the correct pictures in place. So hopefully it'll go through for you. As Emily said, I'm Indigenous to Aotearoa. I come from the Ngāti Whātua, Ngāpuhi, and I'm from Ngāti Whātua, Ngāpuhi, and Tainui descent. I'm a proud Māori woman who is queer and schizophrenic. So my melting pot starts straight away. This is a picture of Princess Sapuia, who was a sister to the Māori king. She was an influential Māori leader, and I should be half as lucky to be like her. So I thought I'd share that with you. So these are some terms that I've had to endure over the years. When I look at the colour of my skin, it takes courage to listen to this crap. And these words are not just destined for me, they're destined for many of us. So I'm brown when they want to dismiss my blackness. And in those situations, it's when they say, well, you're not really black, you're brown. And that's true, but I'm black when they want to run me down. So I've turned it up on end. I'm that schizo who needs medication. So they turn that around on me. I'm that radical queer who waves the flag. We all have been exposed at some point to derogatory remarks, especially those of us who have mental health issues, those of us who are queer, those of us who are black. It's a choice that we make after that, how we handle it. And for me, I've gone on to do things that work for me. So I've learned to turn negatives into positives. I identify as a strong black woman, and I look at past traumas through a survivor's lens. Now, all these things, when I talk about a melting pot, all these things I've experienced. It's now called family violence, but back when I was being hurt, it was domestic violence. I've experienced racism, sexism, homophobia, stigma and discrimination. And I know I'm not alone. I know that part of this audience has either experienced all of that or some of it, and that's going to continue. It doesn't have to continue though. We don't have to put up with it. For gender and domestic violence, I was in a couple of relationships in my early years, and they were same-sex relationships, so it wasn't even a man beating me up, which people think. It was another woman. And they were really violent, and I was silenced. And violence silences you. It doesn't matter what kind of violence it is, it just silences you. And there are many, many people, both men and women, who are exposed to violence, and they cannot speak, and they cannot hear, and they cannot learn, and they cannot progress. And for me, that's what it was like. I spent very early years in those relationships, and they formed who I was. I came out of them battered and bruised. I remember in one situation, I had two relationships and they were both violent. And one of them, they gave me a choice, and I kind of laugh about it now, but it's not that funny. And that was whether I wanted to die on the high level bridge or the low level bridge. And I said, the low level bridge, please. I ended up in the accident and emergency hospital clinic 6 weeks in a row on a Saturday night, having been beaten up. The last time I was there, I had a gash in my head. The time before that, I had 2 broken hands. The time before that, I had a dislocated leg, and so it went on. And every time that partner took me to hospital, the doctors always said, "You are so lucky to have your friend here to take you home." And I couldn't say anything. I couldn't say, this friend that you're talking about is going to kill me one of these days. There'll come a Saturday night that I won't make it here alive. And there was no one to go to at that time. I was disenfranchised from my family because I was gay. Since that time, things have changed for my family, which I'm grateful for. But at that time, I was probably 17, and that's what my life was like. And I thought I would die. I didn't plan ahead longer than a day. And I know there are many of you who have experienced that too. And it's easy to say now, well, that kind of built my character. But you don't learn character from being violated. You don't learn character from being beaten up, have the shit beaten out of you. You learn to be afraid. I think back to 17, and my very first job was as a cook in an orphanage, in the Salvation Army orphanage. I had a girlfriend, and we lived with her mother. Her mother went to the captain of the Salvation Army Lodge and told him that I was gay. The captain came to me and said to me, "We really like you. But I've heard that you're having a relationship with a girl. If this is true, we have to let you go. But if it's not true, you can stay." And at 17, I thought, no, I'm not going to stay. I'm not going to deny who I am. So I said, I better go. And years later, ironically, I became the general manager of the Victorian arm of the Salvation Army. And I was a general manager of youth services, disability and industry. And there were more gay people working for the Salvation Army than you could wave a stick at. So you do survive some things to see things turn around. So I've experienced all these things, and then stigma. And those of us with mental health issues know what that means. Or discrimination, we know what that means too. I remember going for a job, a promotion. I wanted a promotion, and I didn't get it because they said that because I was schizophrenic, I was probably going to be too stressed with the workload. So they thought I shouldn't have that job. And they felt okay to tell me that. And that's so unfair that people can feel justified to run you down to your face. And stigma. I don't really accept my diagnosis. I've been stuck with it for many years now. But and I put it down to being, it's a component of who I am. It's not who I am. And those of us who have mental health issues know what it's like to have stigma. So let's see, with sexism, I worked for a few, in my younger days, I've worked for a few bosses who said, you'll never get anywhere because you're a woman. And I said to them, how do you know that? And I was, probably 18. And they said, because women never get anywhere. So don't even try. So what I learned to do to survive all of these isms is I learned to be angry. I learned to be mournful. But anger is a good emotion if it's channeled in the right way. It's not a good emotion to hang on to because it just drags you down. So years later, when I work with young people, I would say to them, anger is a good emotion because most of those young people were silenced. So I could relate to how they were and they could relate to me. And so when they stopped being silent and started getting pissed off and started yelling, I was like, "Ooh, that's great, fantastic, you're using your voice, keep on going." And they would say to me, I know, anger is a good emotion. I say, that's right, because you're finally breaking out. You're finally being heard. You finally have choice about how you want to live your life. But on the way of all those jobs that I had, I learned how to hide things. I learned how to hide being queer. I learned how to hide psychosis. But now today, I don't want to hide anymore. I will no longer be society's punching bag. I will not be silenced into submission. I will own my mother's skin. When I was 5, thereabouts, 5, a man called my mother a nigger. And I saw the shame come over her face. And I was just a little tacker, but I knew that was wrong. And I was determined that that would not happen to my mother again. So I will rise above those who would oppress her. I will challenge and ask, why can't I? I've done a number of these talks, even though I haven't done a webinar before, I've done a number of these talks over the years to different audiences. And some of the young people that I've talked to, they say to me, how did you get that job that you're doing? Given you've got all these things, given you're schizophrenic, given you're out and proud about being queer, how'd you get that job? And I say to them, I had some special people in my life who just believed in me. I didn't always have bad bosses. I had some excellent bosses. When I was at the Salvation Army later on in life, the CEO said to me, what do you want to do here? I said, I want your job. And she said, you'll probably have it one day. But I never thought at that time, because I'd been surrounded by really positive people, that was a bad thing to say. So the young people said to me, how did you get your job? I said, a bit of luck, a bit of learning, and a mentor that gave me a chance. So I've always tried to be that mentor to give people a chance. What goes round comes round. I really believe in karma. I want to pay it forward. I made that commitment as a 5-year-old to pay it forward to make life better for my mother. Those things don't change. Time is sometimes of the essence when you're being oppressed. I think about some of the people that have helped me get along. And what they said was, I was curious. We always found you curious, Maggie. You always wanted to know why you couldn't do the next job. I try to encourage other people to do the same thing. Someone said to me, for those of you who don't know, and some of you may know, I now hold the position of Deputy Commissioner of the Mental Health Complaints Commission. When I heard about that job going, and I'm doing it for a year and then I'm going back to Vimiac, but when I heard about that job, it was in terms of other people going for it. And I just thought, I could be a commissioner. And somebody said to me, why do you think that? And I said, why not? I've got a few isms. That'd be good to be a commissioner. And I was fortunate enough to get that job. It's like, it's a belief that I have in myself that I believe other people can have as well. This is Fanna Cooper. In 1975, she led a march from the top of the North Island to Parliament House. I joined that march as a 15-year-old when it went through my town in Hamilton. I felt so proud to stand beside my peers. And today, I feel just as proud seeing young people, same age that I was, standing up for climate change and Black Lives Matter. They are the leaders of tomorrow. I hope that they don't have to go through what I went through to get there, to get to be a leader. I hope that they get some mentors along the way who give them a leg up. Like I said, I've been fortunate to have amazing mentors, leaders who provided belief and opportunity, a reauthorising of humankind. Fanna Cooper was an old woman when she did that march, but she started when she was a young woman and she never gave up. And that's what I intend to do. I intend to never give up. And I believe we can all be the same. I didn't survive the isms to become a seat warmer in life. Now, I heard that saying, I heard about seat warmer in life. I heard that saying just a couple of weeks ago, but it made a lot of sense. And they were talking in terms, this person was talking in terms of going to meetings and belonging to committees and things like that. And they said, I don't want to be a seat warmer. I want to contribute. And that's me. I didn't survive these isms to become a seat warmer in life. I'm proud to stand beside my peers and be a mentor to the next generation. And I know there are lots of peers within the mental health system. And I am proud to stand beside them. And I am proud to stand beside other Māori people. People have said to me, in times of when they're being racist. Why are you here? Why are you in Australia? If you love Maoris that much, why don't you go back home? And that's a good question to ask. I know that I take up space that Indigenous Australians don't get to take up because I'm taking it up. I understand that. And I'm incredibly, I hope, respectful of those issues. But my place is here right now to do what I need to do. For me, for the people I represent, for the groups that I'm a part of. But I can't do it alone. And this is our canoe. This is our waka. This waka belongs to Tainui. It's always moving forward. It's not enough to survive the isms. For me, it's not enough to survive the isms and lament about them without making change. Like life, the canoe has its ebbs and flows. Its beginning influences our future. You cannot move this alone, though. It takes a collective effort. It takes a community to make it work. I hope that I get to be part of the broader community in Victoria and Australia, ongoing for quite some time. I hope that those young ones who are struggling, that those people of all ages who are struggling with domestic violence or family violence at this time, with homophobia, with sexism, with racism, that all of us here today can collectively make a difference in their lives. It's a commitment I make. And the fact that you're here listening and you haven't switched off, I'll be looking at the numbers, so you haven't switched off so far, says that you are like that too. I hope that my future continues to be brighter. But I don't do it alone. I hope that I can assist in making someone else's future be brighter as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maggie. That was absolutely incredible, which I'm sure everyone will agree. So if there's any questions for Maggie, if you could pop them into the chat, and then I can read them out. Also, Maggie, is it all right for me to put up your slides onto the website, onto the VimeApp website, so people can have a look?
Sure, that's fine.
Yeah. So we'll make sure that the recording of this webinar and Maggie's slides are up on the website in case anybody wants to rewatch it or share. Please feel free to. And if anyone's got any questions, please pop them in the chat. Okay, so Ruby has said, how can we support Indigenous peoples to health equality in the system?
Look, I think that what has to happen first is that we have to accept that Indigenous people exist, and there are lots of platforms in Australia and in Aotearoa, I won't say it's just an Australian thing, where Indigenous people don't exist. So firstly, let's accept that. secondly, let's ask, what can we do? What do you want? Rather than offering ways that aren't aligned with the people that we want to assist. So I think asking what can we do, and then finding a way to do it.
Anna's asked, in terms of the solution, what might be the first step? So I'm not sure if that kind of aligns with what you were just saying about asking.
Well, I think the first step is wanting to, in the lived experience space, the first thing is making space for Indigenous people to participate within that lived experience workforce, within that lived experience discussion space. And we can do that by opening the doors, not closing them, and also not by. I remember somebody saying once, why hadn't for VMIAC, why hadn't we got Indigenous committee members? And which is a fair point to say. And they said, there are heaps out there, why don't you go get them? And it's like, well, you know, they're not pieces of wood that you can just pick up and drag around where you want them to be. It's about choice, but also it's about educating VMIAC so that we know what we need to know to have Indigenous people on our committee. It's not enough just to get one person and think, okay, well, you now represent the whole mass, you do the job. It's more than that. And that's for any job where Indigenous people might be employed. It's not enough just to have one person. You have to actually have positive discrimination in employment practices so you can employ as many as you need to employ. But you need to have an understanding. And I think we get that understanding by saying, what do we need to do? Let them instruct us on what we need to do. I think that's where change will come about, is if we listen and then do it.
Yeah, I agree. And I completely agree with the education part as well. Can't really do much if we don't educate ourselves. Few more questions. So Kristen's asked, how do you think we can reclaim the discourse around recovery? The term has been hijacked by government, mental health providers, NDIA, etc.
It's a bit like how I just answered the last question. They have to let us in to do it.
Yeah.
I have to say, I'm at the table with lots of government people. The discourse is there, though. That's very true. But it's better to be at the table and challenge and ask why and bring about change than to sit from the outside and say they're not doing it. That's my belief. And I understand that's not the belief of everybody. I understand that. But change can come about for Māori people or Indigenous people by us sitting back and waiting for it to happen. We had to go get it. It's just how you get it. But I understand that that's not everybody's choice.
Absolutely. Another question from Charlie. What improvements do you see for mental health in regards to gender?
What was that again, sorry?
What improvements do you see for mental health in regards to gender?
Well, I think the new, I think if I look at gender in terms of two ways, one is looking at it from a queer perspective. The new Pride Centre is a significant shift, I think, in the development of queer space. Hopefully that will have a mental health component as well, which will enable us to influence in that space. In terms of gender around I have heard that some places misgender people in their work practices. That's not a good thing. That's where I can challenge those things, by being at the table and actually challenging those situations. I would hope, I do hope, that the lived experience leaders out there stand up for the rights. And I know for a fact they do. They stand up for the rights of gender. They stand up for the rights of lived experience consumers, carers, and participants. I hope that answers your question.
I think so. A few more questions coming through. So David has asked, how much awareness do you think there is of intersectionality at a government level?
Not much.
No.
Not much. But again, we can wait for them to change, or we can make them change. And by making them change is by being there and arguing our points. And we shouldn't, and hopefully it will come to a point where we don't have to argue, it just happens. I have a lot of faith around the Royal Commission, although the bed factor, that's a crunchy point with me. But the fact that we're going to get a service that will be run by consumers is a bit of a light along the way. It's not, when we have a city that is run by consumers, then I know that we're achieving what we want to achieve. So one service, let's make it 20. Let's make it 40. Let's make it so that there actually doesn't need to be any of those services, because the system doesn't have to exist.
Absolutely. Shelley has asked, how do we link different generations and their different ideas around identity and consumer engagement?
Again, it helps if we want to do that. There's much wealth in using our older generation to assist the younger generation around how to do things, around how to share that experience. There's an example of a service in New York, although you wouldn't want to be there now with COVID. But the reception is run by the elders of the community. They are the welcoming party when you first go in there. It's a community service that acknowledges what the worth of elders. and those elders share their responsibility around to the younger people who come in. It's been quite a successful model around community spaces and the intersectionality of generations.
Ali's asking, is it the Icarus project?
It's the door. But just on that emerging of different ways of working with people, I've heard there's in Aotearoa there's a drug and alcohol service that when there are issues within whānau, within family, they have a residential service where they take the whole family in. They don't just take the individual. They take the wife, the children, the grandparents, and they educate all of them, bring them all up to scratch on how to live their life together. Those kinds of models, I think, work really well when you don't have issues of violence or power struggles. But I think they work really well.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to read out what your sister has written on the chat because it's so wonderful. I've been listening to my sister's story and I'm so very proud of her. The honesty and recollection of her life's encounters are as raw to her today as they were back then. I totally believe there are thousands of Maggies, and I think my sister's aspiration would be that they be given a chance to tell their stories too, not tucked away in some counselling room for only one person to hear. I think that's really powerful. I think that's such a wonderful thing to hear from your family. Kristen's asked another question. What are effective ways of gaining a seat at the table, given that the door is usually closed and the gatekeeper is a government department?
Well, I think it's not bad for a little Maori girl who happens to be queer, who happens to be schizophrenic, who happens to be asked to the table. That didn't happen overnight though. But it did happen without me having to suck up their ass. Because I say it how it is. They don't always agree, but I never change my story. It stays the same. When people are oppressed, when I've been given a position to assist people who are constantly oppressed, then I have a responsibility, and I take that responsibility serious. I was probably a bit cheeky saying, little Maori girl, queer, schizophrenic. But I know there are others at the table as well, not just me. And sometimes we don't want to be at the table because they're not saying the right things. But I think I don't want to be a seat warmer. I want to be there for a purpose. And if I can't achieve anything, then I will walk away. And right now, I think I can achieve things. That's the aim. But it can be, like I've said, it's not for some. But I'm happy to stand beside those who want to, and I'm happy to understand those who don't want to. Everybody has their own reasons for what they do. I accept that.
Tom has asked, what do you think people with privilege should do to make things better for those with less?
Identify that they're privileged That would be a good start. Privilege comes in many ways, you know. I'm fortunate enough to know people who identify that they're privileged and work towards making a change. So I'm fortunate to know that. But in many ways, I'm privileged. And I acknowledge that. I have a job. There's 1 million unemployed people in Australia, and I'm privileged to have a job. I should use that privilege wisely. I think those who have a job, who have an education, we have a duty to use it wisely. It's not enough to say that when I get round to it, I'll do it. We have to make a commitment to do it every day. Never forget. Never ever forget what we have. Because for lots and lots of consumers and carers out there, and I'll concentrate on consumers, they're struggling every day to survive. It would be amiss of me to be in the role that I'm in and not do something about it, to bring about change. So for those who are privileged, acknowledge it and then move on and do something about it.
Thank you for that. So are there any more questions? I mean, we have had quite a few. I don't think there are, but if anybody does have any questions that they think of after the webinar, please feel free to email us or call in and we can pass it on to Maggie and get a response back to you. Big thank you to you, Maggie. That was extremely powerful and very inspiring. The feedback on the chat has just been overwhelmingly good. So thank you again. And thank you everybody for joining. And yes, everyone stay safe and try and get away from this horrible weather. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Maggie.
Thank you, Emily. Bye, John.